What you are about to hear is the story of a love that defied the boundaries of duty and desire. In the lush gardens of a 15th century Persian palace, two souls found each other only to be torn apart by fate and honor. Under the golden afternoon sun, the nobleman Rahim moved carefully through the palace gardens, trimming the roses and shaping the hedges. The gardens were a tapestry of geometry and lushness, an endless flow of green accented by flowers in every shade of red, yellow, and violet. Rahim took pride in his work, tending to every leaf and petal, knowing that these gardens were a place of peace and beauty amidst the tensions of the court. Little did he know this sanctuary was also where his heart would soon be lost. One day, as he was kneeling near a bed of jasmine, a soft voice drifted through the air, lilting and rich with words he had never heard before. He looked up to find a woman seated beneath a cypress tree, scribbling verses onto parchment with an intensity that mirrored his own focus on the garden. She was dressed in flowing robes, her hair partly hidden by a veil, yet her eyes sparkled with intelligence and a fierce gentleness that immediately captivated him. This was Layla, the palace's resident poetess, known for her wisdom and the beauty of her words that enchanted the entire court. Drawn to her presence, Rahim found himself stopping to listen each time he passed her shaded corner. She often recited her verses aloud, her words speaking of nature, love, and the mysteries of the heart. Eventually, their glances turned into nods, their nods into smiles, and soon, Rahim gathered the courage to speak to her. Their conversations began as light exchanges about flowers and poetry, but over time they grew more intense, more personal, touching on dreams, fears, and the quiet loneliness each felt in their duties to the palace. Rahim was engaged to a noblewoman selected by his family, a match that was expected and practical. Layla, in turn, was bound to serve the court, her talents in poetry and philosophy placing her as an advisor to those of higher rank. But in the secluded corners of the garden, under the fragrant branches of the flowering trees, these expectations seemed distant, as if the garden itself existed beyond the reach of courtly rules. Their love blossomed like the roses Rahim tended, delicate yet intense. He found himself lingering in her presence longer each day, and she, in turn, waited eagerly for his footsteps on the gravel paths. They spoke in hushed tones, their hands brushing as they exchanged poems, each line heavy with hidden meaning. Layla's words became softer, her laughter more frequent, and Rahim's usually steady heart raced with every shared moment. Yet, they both knew the risks. One day, as Rahim took her hand beneath the dark canopy of the trees, a shadow passed across Layla's face. "Rahim, we live in a world built on duty, on expectations," she whispered. Her words lingered in the air, a reminder of the lives that awaited them beyond the garden's walls. But as he looked into her eyes, he could see the same longing, the same fire that he felt. They were kindred spirits bound by a love as wild and unyielding as the garden around them. And though unspoken, they both knew that this love would demand sacrifices. Their romance, forbidden and fragile, grew within the sanctuary of the palace gardens, but the closer they became, the more the tension grew between their passion and the unyielding forces of duty and honor. Days turned to weeks, and each stolen moment between Rahim and Layla became more precious. They met in the hidden alcoves of the garden, under the cover of twilight or in the earliest hours of dawn. Each meeting was a secret, each glance shared with the awareness that they were dancing on the edge of a precipice. In their private world, Layla's voice, soft and full of warmth, became Rahim's solace, while his gentle touch gave her a sense of protection she had never known. Their love was alive in the words they exchanged, Layla's verses full of longing, Rahim's stories about the garden brimming with admiration. As Layla recited her poetry, Her voice broke with raw emotion, her words becoming confessions disguised in verse. She spoke of the yearning cypress, of a heart lost in bloom, her words barely containing the fierce love she felt. Rahim, unable to resist, would answer her in kind, describing a night without end in a garden that holds two souls in its roots. In the beauty of the garden, their words seemed to blend into the very air, creating a world that was theirs alone. But fate is rarely kind to lovers bound by duty. Rumors began to circulate within the palace, whispered by servants and overheard by courtiers. Rahim's betrothed, Zara, had noticed his distant gaze and questioned the hollow silences that filled their conversations. She, a dutiful daughter of nobility, knew well enough not to pry, yet her suspicions grew with each passing day. Meanwhile, Layla's frequent absences from the court were starting to raise questions among the advisors she served. The whispers of their romance grew louder, like a storm brewing on the horizon, and both lovers could feel the weight of those unspoken suspicions pressing down on them. One evening, Layla arrived in the garden with a parchment in her hand, her expression clouded with worry. She shared news that her role was soon to change. She would be reassigned to accompany a royal envoy, far from the palace and, more painfully, far from Rahim. She revealed her fears of being sent away, her voice breaking as she spoke of the possibility of never seeing him again. Rahim's heart clenched, and in that moment, he was ready to forsake everything. They spoke of escape, of leaving the confines of the palace and its expectations to live a life of freedom, away from prying eyes and the obligations that kept them apart. But the gravity of their reality quickly set in. They were bound by honor, by family, by a society that would never accept their love. Rahim, torn between his longing for Layla and the life he had been raised to lead, felt helpless. His heart wanted to defy everything for her, but his mind knew the price of such defiance. Their dreams of escape dissolved in the chill of that evening, and they found themselves facing the painful truth that their love, as powerful as it was, could not easily conquer the forces aligned against them. In the days that followed, their meetings took on a somber tone, the weight of their situation settling over them. They shared quiet moments beneath the cypress trees, their words few but their gazes heavy with unspoken emotion. Layla wrote him one last poem, her verses filled with love, sorrow, and a promise that no matter where she was taken, her heart would remain with him. As Rahim read her words, his heart broke, but he knew their parting was inevitable. Their love, like the garden in which it had flourished, was beautiful yet fragile, bound to be left behind in the relentless march of duty and honor. The day of Layla's departure arrived all too soon, and the palace was abuzz with preparations for the envoy's journey. Rahim could do nothing but watch from afar, bound by the walls of duty and expectation. His heart ached with a fierce, unyielding pain as he glimpsed Layla one last time, her face veiled, her eyes downcast as she was escorted toward the waiting caravan. She did not look back, for she knew that if she did, her resolve would shatter, and she would be unable to leave. But Rahim could see the slight tremble in her frame, a silent farewell that cut deeper than words ever could. That night, unable to bear the emptiness that filled the garden in her absence, Rahim wandered through the familiar paths they had shared, now shadows of memory. He found a small parchment tucked beneath a cypress tree where they had often met. With trembling hands, he unfolded it and read her final poem written in delicate, graceful script. In a garden where moonlight lingers, lies a love bound by stars unseen. Though miles may part and time wither, I am yours where the world has been. The words seemed to breathe life back into the garden, filling the silence with the lingering presence of her love. Rahim knew that Layla's heart, like his, would forever carry the weight of what they had shared. As months passed, Rahim found himself more alone than ever, each day a reminder of what he had lost. He fulfilled his duties with a quiet strength, his face a mask that hid the turmoil within. His betrothed, Zara, noticed the change in him, but said nothing. She, too, carried the weight of unspoken truths, understanding in her silence that the man beside her had given his heart elsewhere. They lived like ghosts, bound by obligation yet hallowed by the absence of love. One evening, as he wandered the garden alone, Rahim heard whispers from palace servants about the returning envoy. His heart quickened with a mix of hope and fear. The thought of seeing Layla again stirred something deep within him, a glimmer of light in the darkness he had come to accept. But as the envoy arrived, Rahim's heart shattered. Layla was not among them. Her role had shifted, they said, and she had been reassigned to another distant court, far from his reach. Despair washed over him, a final blow that left him hollow. He wandered back to the garden, his sanctuary, his prison. Standing beneath the cypress where they had shared their first stolen glance, he closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him, the soft laughter, the shared verses, the warmth of her presence that lingered like a haunting melody. Their love had bloomed in secret, yet it had marked his heart in a way nothing else ever could. In his grief, Rahim found a bitter solace in his memories. Though they could never be together in life, he carried her spirit with him in the quiet places of his soul, a love as enduring as the garden they had shared. The beauty of their love lived on in the shadowed paths and blossoming flowers, a secret held within the heart of the palace. And in that silent garden, as the years passed, Rahim became a part of the place they had once called theirs. A solitary figure beneath the ancient cypress, forever waiting, forever remembering, bound by a love that defied time, distance, and even fate itself.